what parts only humans can do and what parts the machine should do better.
The best results oftentimes come from perfectly unjustifiable actions.
It's hard to ask questions about the things you don't know.
Hi everyone, it's me, Anna. I'm here with Irek, and we are interrupting this technology sprint with a very special. Because a couple of months ago, all of our marketing processes have also been interrupted by the great AI revolution we're currently living in. So we figured we deserve to talk about it. We deserve to address what's happening right now and the uncertainty we're all experiencing. And we were very lucky because Irek was able to nail us a perfect guest to discuss it with.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited because we are going to talk to Vaughn about what it means to remain human in marketing, how to build solid marketing teams, and how to use the available AI tools to produce meaningful outcomes. So enjoy this one.
Hi, Vaughn. Hi, Irek. Hi, everyone. Really good to have you on. And before we get started with a really exciting topic of AI during times of uncertainty, or better said, AI-driven uncertainty, Vaughn, I have a special question for you. What's the one thing in life you wish you could automate?
Oh, wow. Complicated travel arrangements.
And what do you mean, like complicated?
So I think complicated, I mean, sometimes you want to get from, point A to point B to point C to point D, but you're trying to intersect sort of the dates when you could go. So you have sort of a bit fuzzy criteria for what days and what routes you want. And it would be very useful. And I think actually this is something AI would be very good for doing. It would be very useful to see your options, prioritize based on parameters that you give for when you might want to travel and how you might want to travel. But I think this is something that we'll end up talking about today, about what things so-called AI is good at and what things humans are good at, right? So things like that.
I think humans are good at traveling and AI is good at arranging travels.
Yes, it's true that humans are good at traveling, but I think humans are good at telling AI what they want AI to do for them. Or at least that is what humans could be good at.
Yeah, so I like the second phrasing more, because right now I can really disagree with all the ChatGPT prompts coming up, all the tutorials on how to ask exactly what you want written or designed. Stuff like Motion AI, their Mid-Journey. It's really hard to write a good prompt. I wouldn't say we're good at it just yet.
Yeah, because asking questions, first of all, you need to understand reality a bit in order to ask the proper questions. So it's not that easy. It's like, for example, you usually, it's hard to ask questions about the things you don't know or you are not aware of. So I would say that even coming with those prompts, it is going to be, I've heard recently, because one of my friends, like a month ago, he joked that the prompt whisperer is going to be the high demand job in 2023. And now I've heard about prompt engineers. So people who can engineer the correct prompt. So, but before we actually, go into the conversation, if you could just tell a few words about yourself, because, we've met a few months ago. So I feel that I know you a bit, but definitely for our audience, it would be cool if actually they understood, your angle, who you are.
For sure. So I'm a professor of strategy and entrepreneurship at University College London. What I focus on is I try and understand how to build teams and organizations that work well and also can adapt and can do new things, even in situations which are highly uncertain. And I wrote a book about this a few years ago, which I think, Irek, was probably how we first met, about how you build teams that can hire people when you don't know what jobs they need to do, how you can motivate people when it's unclear what success looks like, and also how you can set goals when there is a lot of uncertainty in the situation. That book was called The Uncertainty Mindset, Innovation Insights from the Frontiers of Food, because it's actually about how innovation teams in R&D in food work. And now I'm working on sort of broadening out our understanding of what it means to not know something and how to make use of that to do fun stuff, basically.
Nice. And this is brilliant. Right now, a lot of companies, like, they are, forced to do some, layoffs, restructure. And actually this year, there is like a massive uncertainty from the very beginning of the year, I can imagine. And I also imagine that quite a few of our listeners, they, start their companies, they think about introducing marketing teams, or actually just develop marketing teams. So here, based on your experience and knowledge, what would be, your tip if anyone is like thinking about how to build a solid team? What should be the things they focus on,
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say about building a solid team is there are some kinds of work which are not actually uncertain, right? Like if you know what needs to be done, and you also know what the success definition looks like, I'm not sure that you need to build a team that is dealing with uncertainty in terms of what it does. Your company may not be dealing with the broader business environment as well, but that's a different question, right? So I think we first need to divide the question into two parts. If what you're trying to figure out is how to build a team that deals well with uncertainty in its own work, then you have to first make sure that the work is actually uncertain. Now, a lot of marketing work is not actually uncertain. A lot of marketing work is, frankly, it's just grunt work. We don't like it, but that's what it is. Now, a lot of companies that have to do marketing are in business environments that are highly uncertain. That is a separate question. So if you are in an environment that is highly uncertain, I think the one thing that if you're building a team you need to think about is you need to build a team that is filled with people who are able to change and want to change what they do to adapt to business environments as they change as well, right? So, for example, if you have a company filled with people who only want to do the exact jobs that they were hired for, but the environment is changing so rapidly that the company needs to pivot very fast. So basically all startups are in this situation. What you want is you want employees who are able to pivot with you, right? The company now does something completely different. The employees are willing to figure out what it is that they need to do next and then do it. To do that, I think my view is you should probably hire in a different way from hiring in a conventional company where you just want people to fit a job scope and then do what is in their job scope for the rest of their careers. One of the threads that I hope will come out in today's conversation is this idea that the things that we should focus humans on doing are the things that only humans can do, right? So we should let the machines do the things that machines can do better, more cheaply, more quickly. And then we should focus as humans on the things that only humans can do, that machines, ideally are things that machines cannot do at all, and then get really good at doing those things. And I think that's one of the reasons why negotiated joining and open-ended roles kind of works as well. But I think that negotiated joining and open-ended roles will make a lot more sense after we've talked about all these other things that I think people are thinking about in relation to work in general and also work in the marketing space specifically.
Yeah, so maybe let's start with our ideas on what aspect of marketing, because we still try to focus in this podcast on marketing or business, but rather marketing. So actually, what does it mean to be human in marketing, and what are the elements? What do you think about this? Because for me, this particular podcast episode as a kind of context for us to have this meaningful talk, to exchange ideas, to first network, get to know each other, and this is cool. I'm not afraid that any AI or any technology will just feel the need to do something like we, because I'm excited, and I believe that this feeling is also something that is typically human, but it's also business related in this context.
And I think we're making too a really cool polar opposites here because I am terrified. I think everything we're doing can be replaced by AI. So, Vaughn, I would appreciate it if you put me at ease a bit.
I don't know if I can put you at ease, but I can share a point of view, right? So I used to work in marketing as well. So when I was at Google, one of the roles I was in was I was working in marketing in so-called big tech. I think that there's really sort of, I'm going to oversimplify, but it's oversimplification so that we can see something more clearly. In marketing, I think there are basically two different kinds of work that you need to do, and they're both important, but they're two different kinds. One of them is figuring out where you're trying to go, and then the other one is actually going there, right? So the analogy back to travel planning is the same. Like, I can figure out where I want to go and about when I want to be there. And then what I want a very, very good whole market sourcing travel agent to do the planning actually for me and tell me what the optimal thing is given what I want. I think for marketing, you've got a very similar situation. Like, you've got a product and you need to do two things. First, you need to figure out who is the right audience or buyer of the product. And then after that, once you figured out who the right buyer of the product is, you need to figure out how to get it to them. In doing all these things, I think humans are the only ones so far who can make essentially a judgment call, right? Like, they're the only ones who can say, it may seem as though it's equally good to go after this particular market, let's say B2B clients in North America who are small and medium-sized businesses. Or we can go after that market, which is B2B clients in North America who are like between this quantity in sales every year and that quantity in sales. I think a human can look at a bunch of information and make a decision based on that, but only a human can do that, right? So it's not, I don't think this is yet a question that you can ask an AI. Maybe in the future we can, but at the moment we can't. Now, the other big part of doing marketing is a lot of the stuff that marketing teams end up doing today, like things like creating assets and managing them and deploying them in the right way in campaigns. It's like doing a lot of the basic data analysis to understand the effects of campaigns and then deciding what to do with campaigns after that. I think one of the big challenges for us is all of the work that we have done before AI is a combination of stuff that only humans can do and stuff that machines can do more quickly. And that's why we're confused at the moment, right? It's very hard for us to tell what parts only humans can do and what parts the machine should do better. Because until, I would say, probably 8 to 10 years ago, we were doing all of it. And then over time, there's been more and more automation of stuff. I mean, the company that you all built is one of those things. And so as more things get automated to better or worse degrees of efficacy, we are gradually learning what things are things that only humans can do and what things are things machines can do better. And I think the first thing, Anna, to assuage your fear is, I think we're worried because we're not clear about what things only humans can do. And thinking a little bit more about that and testing those ideas against the machines, I think is a way to get started.
I totally agree with you. And for example, the concept of creativity. This is interesting because in marketing, we tend to, let's say, I think about copywriting and content creation. And in content creation and copywriting, you have this, creativity element, which means that you can understand, as a human, you can understand this idea. You know that this idea is quite complex because it needs to represent your business needs and, your customers' information needs and something. And then only you as a human can come up with this like slogan or this one sentence that actually is relatable. But now it seems that if you have this proper language model, you can have you can just like in a snap, you can have 10 of them. And and suddenly, is it like real creativity or is it just like a proper language model that you acquired, that this is like some language proficiency? So I don't know, what is creativity in marketing?
It's a great question, and that's actually a great example, right? Because Earlier you were talking about prompt engineering. I think, and this is just my own view. I don't know if this is correct, but this is so far how I think of it. Even given that example, you need a tagline and you ask a language model to give you some options. You have to prompt it to tell it what world of possibilities it needs to look in order to give you something back, right? And when it gives you something back, it gives you 10 options, which there's a few possibilities for those 10 options. Some of those 10 options may be things that you as the human had not thought of before. And you see them and you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of a cool thing. Or all 10 of them might be things that you've thought of before, and they are different expressions of things that you as the human would have also done. But in either case, there are two things that so far only humans can do properly. It may look as though machines can do them, but only humans can do properly. The first one is only humans can decide what to ask the machine, right? That's the prompt part. And more people are realizing that the prompting is the really difficult part of interacting with the AI. You can interact with the so-called AI and it can give you a bunch of garbage back because you didn't prompt it correctly. Or if you prompt it correctly, you can get something really useful. So clearly what this means to me is that there is some meaning making that is going on when you're writing prompts. And that part, so far, we have not yet been able to figure out how to get machines to do it properly. We'll come to the edge case where they look like they're doing it properly later, but we haven't yet figured out how to do it properly. The second part that is very human is in deciding which of the 10 is actually good, right? So you get 10, 15, 20, 100 responses back, and you look at all of them. And some of them will clearly be better for what you, the human, want them to do than others. And in the end, it's still you, the human, who is putting a layer of meaning on top of the response that comes back from the machine, right? And if you are not good at doing it, you'll pick the wrong ones as a human. And if you're good at doing it, you'll pick the right ones. So I think what that example is beginning to show us is there are some people who are good at using the machines to get a good set of possibilities from which to choose. Those are good prompt writers. And then there are also going to be some people who are good at choosing from among what the language model or the AI more generally is giving back to them, right? They're the discriminating curators, I guess you would call it. And both the prompting and the curation at the moment, these are things which, if you think about what prompting actually is and what curation actually is in this context, are things that machines can't do yet, right? And I think the same is true if you talk about writing and creativity. I tend not to use the word creativity so much because there are some aspects of marketing that are really not about being creative, right? There are some aspects of marketing that are about, for instance, doing very good quantitative marketing begins with having good assets that you're going to test in market against a particular success metric. But most of really good quantitative marketing is making sure that you've set up your hypotheses correctly so that you're gathering data that allows you to do the analysis of whether or not campaigns are working as you want and they have the efficacy that you want. Part of it is creativity, the part where you come up with something which is new. And then the other part of it is about reliable execution. And I think we can separate at the moment what humans seem to be good at as being mostly connected to coming up with new ideas as well as thinking about whether or not an idea is good, right? Those are two separate things. One of them is creativity. The other one is what I would call more generally meaning making. And then the execution side of things, I think, is where machines tend to outperform us for good reason. And I think being able to separate the two parts is really important in assuaging the fears of people who are worried that they're going to be completely replaced by machines very, very soon.
I actually have a really cool story to accompany that because I absolutely agree with what you just said. And again, I am on the side of people who are scared about being eventually replaced. But I had a super lovely day spent with ChatGPT when I was editing the text. And the curation part of it was actually really fun. It was the most fun I had with the text in a very long time because I was able to use it to take over the procedural operational stuff while I could actually focus on the creative side of things. So it was able to provide me with examples. If I needed some real life applications, I didn't have to spend hours on doing research and connecting with my target audience. Instead, you could just say, hey, ChatGPT, what's the most common struggle marketing agency faces? And of course, it needs to be verified still because AI is nowhere near being an absolute source of truth. But it already provides you this framework that speeds things up a lot. And it made the whole experience much more engaging for me as a writer. Hopefully, it also made the output much more valuable for the end user or the reader.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that example is a good illustration of how we can start to distinguish between what humans can do and what machines can do, right? What machines can do at the moment, this is not a complete list, but certainly what they can do is they can do things where you can describe the procedure with great precision and complete specifiability. For instance, if you ask ChatGPT to replace, so I used to be a copy editor as well. And one of the horrible things would be running into a manuscript where, for instance, they use N dashes in place of M dashes. Now, I used to go through this and I would write like regular expressions to like fix all this stuff. Now you can ask ChatGPT to do it all for you, right? So that's the very basic, it's the most simple and I guess clear example of a task that is fully specifiable that really, why are humans doing this? It's bullshit work, right? So get a machine to do it, perfect. Now, if you go on all the way to the other extreme and you say, we want to create a new campaign and we don't simply want to go with things that we don't want to go with what existing competitors in our space are trying to present this category of products as. What do we do? Okay, so we can ask a language model what existing competitors in the space are positioning the product as so that we know what not to do. But the question that precedes it, and this is sort of the analog to the prompt, first, as humans, we need to decide we want to do something that is different from what everyone else does, right? So far, this is not something that machines can do yet, simply because of the way, I mean, if we're talking just about language models, this is not the way language models are built. Language models are built essentially so that you can understand what is more or less common in the corpus on which they were trained. And so if you know how to prompt, you can still find out what you want to know, which in this case is what is not common or what has not been done in the corpus. You can ask it that. But in and of itself, this is not something that an LLM wants, because one of the things that we know is LLMs can't want things on their own yet. Only humans can want things on their own. So yeah, I think it's a very good way to think of it. And it's like thinking of it as a tool that you have to decide the deployment of, but it's a very sophisticated and very flexible tool if you know how to use it, right? Which is to say, it is like all other tools that humans have ever built. It's exactly the same as a knife. A good cook who knows how to use a knife properly can achieve things that a cook who has never been trained in knife skills cannot do. In the same way, I think we should think of, right now, I think we should think of these machines as tools, and we should learn how to use the tool properly. And this is not to say that they will only ever be a tool. Maybe in the future, maybe even soon in the future, they will learn what it means to make meaning themselves. But so far as I can tell, they haven't done that yet.
I'm also hoping that maybe this interaction with ChatGPT, for example, like, because there are like some alternatives, but maybe this will also be helpful to actually learn how to interact with customers more than actually that you start at some point, to prompt people. Then you wait for the feedback, for the response, and then you kind of like curate it and you just direct the feedback to the product team, to the marketing team. You actually I'm thinking about that because I've seen like a cool change in our team, because it used to be content team. Now it is content and partnerships team. And I've seen that partnerships play bigger and bigger role in the whole process. Also, like I used to be focused on like marketing, I used to be focused on the product and looking at it, from the marketing perspective. So we would, as creative people, as creative human beings, we would like invent or try to imagine what would it be like if we ran our business and we use the product. But then I just figured out it's so much easier to actually ask customers about that, and then just like let them tell me what is the value of a product. It's like tell me what this product is for you. Like, how do you use it? What when is it good? When is it bad? And then I realized, like, wow, this is the angle I've been looking for. That's suddenly everything is easier. Suddenly the answers, like when you said about the curating. So I put the prompts, and then I get so much feedback that I need to be careful about how to curate it. Because some of it is going to be actionable, some maybe not. So still you need to be careful, but connecting, like being able to actually reach out and create those feedback loops with your customers. I'm hoping that maybe the way we use ChatGPT will also maybe help us to try to form meaningful connections with customers. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think so. It's an interesting hypothesis, right? Like one possible reason why so machine learning has been around for a really long time, and in fact, it's been in the infrastructure of a lot of the services that we use and have been built that have been very successful. But I mean, if you think back to before, maybe like 12 months ago, the big wave of people getting excited with AI, it came, I think anyway, it was highly correlated with, maybe not caused by, but very correlated with the emergence of a form of interaction with the so-called AI that looks a lot like things that we already know. Like, so asking Google for an answer. I mean, essentially, when you query Google for a thing that you want, there are some similarities between that interaction. I ask for something I want, an algorithm goes off in the back. Well, I mean, it has already done it. An algorithm goes off in the back and harvests a predetermined answer to come back. In some ways, this is almost exactly what is going on with things like ChatGPT, right? So I wonder whether using ChatGPT will do what you're suggesting, or if we will realize that actually, I think where I probably end up with this, I'm just thinking in real time. Where I end up with it is, I think a thing like ChatGPT is different from Google because it makes it more obvious that when you ask the right questions, you get better answers, right? This is the discovery that prompt engineering is an important thing. You can't just like randomly ask it a question and hope to get a good answer. You can design the question well and get a better answer back. And I'm an ethnographer by training, and I teach interview methods, right? So one of the things which I know from my previous work, which has nothing to do with asking an AI for a bunch of stuff, is that there are ways of asking questions that get you more informative answers. And there are ways of asking questions that get you answers that you expect to get. And there are ways of asking questions that don't get you answers at all, right? So knowing how to ask a question, I think, is something which good questioners have always had in the past. And now maybe what things like ChatGPT will do is it will show more and more people that this is the case, which is a good thing. So human-centered design is basically a way of approaching design that takes this approach, right? Like it says you want to understand how to do a thing, and design a product, design a service. You can do some market research, but the most important kind of market research is asking the humans who might actually use it what it is that is the problem that they're trying to solve, and then figuring out what kinds of solutions they might be interested in using, which is basically what we could do if we were interacting with ChatGPT in a particular way, or any other kind of like conversational front end to a back end large language model.
I mean, here I'm also kind of curious because prompts are usually more than just questions, right? Especially if we're talking about image generational prompts. So there is a certain level of coding even involved where you have to create all the parameters in order to provide those parameters. You need to understand them. For example, like the way I approach Midjourney would be just to say, draw me this, which can be, I don't know, husky on a snowboard. I would end there. Like I wouldn't use any professional, artistic lingo. I wouldn't use specific styles just because I don't know them. And in the end, I would probably be dissatisfied with my husky because I wanted it to be more modern or not. And that's why, like,
Or impressionist or like whatever, right?
exactly. So you need to train not only to ask the right question, I think, which is undoubtedly highly important, but still learn the field you're asking the question about. I hope I got my point across here.
For sure. Yeah, no. And actually, I think those two are, in a way, they're both the same thing, right? So, to use the Midjourney example, if you're trying to prompt it to create an image that you want in a particular visual style or with particular elements inside it, it's, I think what I guess a conversational interface with a language model does is it shows that you actually need to understand the context in order to get what you really want. Because, for instance, if what you actually want is you want like an impressionist style, if you want an impressionist style with a anime style dog on a, like impressionist style whole image with a anime style dog on top of a brutalist style snowboard. If you don't know that those are the labels that we have in the past attached to those visual styles of representation, you will actually find it quite difficult to generate the kind of output with a prompt, right? Whereas if you did know, if for instance you were an art historian of modern, world art, I suppose, you would know those things and you would be able to attach a word to the visual effect that you want. And in fact, text to image is meant to reverse that kind of association, because the way it would work, by the way, if you ask for an impressionist style husky on a snowboard, is you would essentially have to rely on the fact that in previous times in the corpus that this model was trained on, people used the word impressionist or words close to impressionist to describe images that looked impressionist, because without that, the model would not have the connection between the two that was necessary for your word impressionist to create an impressionist seeming image as the result. So I think writing a good prompt is not only knowing what you want. In this case, I think what we're saying is writing a good prompt is knowing that you want something which in your mind looks like an impressionist husky on a snowboard, for example, and also knowing the context enough that you can use the correct label so that the prompt does what you have in your head. If you want to think of it that way, that's exactly the same problem that, like for a very good artist who knows how to use their tools really well, they have an image, for instance, they've got an idea of what they want to create as a sculpture out of marble. And if you are very sophisticated with using your chisel, you can make it look like what you want. I mean, the analogy back to, for instance, just using an example that everybody knows about, because most people have cooked, I suppose, is if you know how to use a knife really well, you can do things that people who don't know how to use knives can't do, right? Like the example that I love is katsuramuki. It's where you take a cylindrical vegetable and with a knife that is usually quite straight on its edge, you peel the cylindrical vegetable into a very long sheet, and then you cut it into like needle fine, like almost like julienne. If you know how to do it, you can totally do it. If you don't know how to do it, you can have exactly the same cylindrical vegetable and exactly the same knife, and you won't be able to do it. Like in replacement of the knife, have language model. In replacement of what you're trying to do, have a prompt. And then if you are good at prompting the tool, you can get Katsuramuki. If you aren't, you can't.
I love it. Really good analogy.
So when I was like listening to, so now I just think about myself, and then if I thought that in order to be able to produce better prompts, I should actually think about experiencing more. So like, the goal will be to understand the impressionism, the brutalism, the anime, or basically being out there and experiencing life converts into better prompts. And also, like, because before our meeting, I read your article, on being human, and I even like wrote down this because it's a really cool sentence. Like, what makes us human is not just how we interact with humans, but also how we interact with ourselves. And this is also like it just blew my mind, because it's true that depending on who you're talking to, the conversation is different. The questions people ask each other are different, because we focus on different things, because we experience life in a different way. So yeah, I wanted to ask you about this. Like, do you how do we actually make better prompts, and where do better prompts come from?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad we got to this question. I really wanted to talk about it. So that article that you just mentioned, Iraq, is really trying to ask people to think about the problem of so-called AI in a different way, right? So a lot of people think about AI today, and there's two major sort of themes. One theme is AI will solve everything. And the other theme, which is sort of the mirror image of that, is AI is going to create all these problems for us because it is going to take away jobs, things like that. It feels to me like actually there's a different way to think about it that helps us understand how it can help us do things better without also fucking everything up. And that way is to ask what it is that, and this goes back to the question I posed at the very beginning, what is it at the moment that only humans can do that the machines cannot do? And at the moment, it seems that making meaning, and we'll talk about what that means in a little bit, making meaning is still one of the things that only humans can do that machines cannot do. Okay, so what is making meaning? And this goes, I think, to your point about interacting with others and interacting with ourselves. When we are interacting with others, we have to understand what their context is so that we can say things to them that make sense for both of our contexts, right? Like, if, for instance, you, so there is another good example of giving gifts is a social interaction. You know, you give a gift so that you, as an expression of regard, to show that you care, all those things. But giving the wrong kind of gift can be really bad, right? So, for instance, if you went to, let's say you go to Japan and you give someone a clock, it's not a good gift in some respects, because it's an indication of impending death, for instance. So understanding context allows you to take an action in a social interaction that either makes sense or doesn't make sense or has the wrong effect. But when we're thinking about interactions with ourselves, that's when we start to think about sort of meaning making in its purest form. When you're interacting with yourself, you don't have to think about whether or not someone else cares about something that you've decided. You could, in theory, just care about what you think about it. So, for instance, I've just been drinking some coffee, and I thought today that this coffee doesn't taste very nice. Now, even that simple decision, that I don't think it tastes very nice today, it tastes different from yesterday. On the one hand, it's a sort of, it's an assessment of a fact of some sort, right? Like, the coffee today does taste different from yesterday, but I've put some meaning on it. I've just decided I like it, I don't like it. And that is the kind of meaning making I'm talking about at its most basic, right? It is deciding on something, even though other people might decide on something a different way. That's just meaning making. Now, it can go all the way from deciding that coffee is good or bad, that's meaning making, to deciding that it's worth it for my company to invest in building a phone that does more than any phone on the market does at the moment, which is what Steve Jobs decided to do when he decided to invest a lot of time and money in the iPhone. Those two acts, the decision on the coffee and then the decision to make a phone that is a real smartphone, the very first one, they look very different, but they're both decisions to do a thing because you have put some kind of value on it. That's what meaning making is. And in our interactions with ourselves, that's the first time that we sort of have a clear and unpolluted view of what it means to make meaning. So right now, I keep on saying, I don't think machines can do this yet. Maybe in the future they will be able to do it. But our ability to decide that something is good or is bad or is better than this other thing, that is the source of our ability to make a decision about whether to ask for a husky on a snowboard in impressionist style, because that's what we think is better, than a husky on a snowboard in anime style, which we think is not as good. Because otherwise, what is the reason for you to ask for it in one style versus another style? And let's not even talk about the style. Why are we asking for a husky on a snowboard? We like it more than a cat on a snowboard, right? As in, when you say, I asked for this because, the thing that comes after because is your reason for doing it. And if you really dig down deeply, eventually all humans have a subjective reason for asking or wanting to take an action in the world. And that's the meaning making part, right? And we often disguise it with a lot of justifications, but in the end, we only do things because we've decided that they are worth doing, or that they are worth doing more than other things that we could also do. And that is the meaning making part of being human. Right now, machines take instructions from us because we decide what is worth doing, and the machines do it for us, which is fine. That's actually, at the moment anyway, where I think machines should be, because machines are still tools. They have not yet become agents, like, agents with the ability to decide what to do. They may be agents that get instructions and do things on behalf of real agents like us. And maybe in the future, they will so-called wake up and become truly agentic, right? Like we get to AGI. That might be cool, but also would be terrifying.
I'm thinking this is such a philosophical direction that most of your actions need to be guided by this, why am I doing this? Like this higher purpose. Because coming back to the husky on the skateboard example, because it's fun. Like, but everything needs to have a reason. And I think this is my problem with approach to marketing. We try to over justify things when sometimes it's just about trial and error. And see, like some of the best viral projects became viral not because of extensive research supporting them, but just because someone was having fun and ended up creating a thing that other people found fun. And I think this is the human excellence bit, when the best results oftentimes come from perfectly unjustifiable actions, when you just feel like something's good.
Well, I mean, if you think about that example, like why a husky on a snowboard? Because it's fun. You would have to go like deeper back into understanding why, for any particular person, the things that they find fun are fun, right? Because a husky on a snowboard, for some people who like huskies and snowboards, I suppose that's fun. For other people who don't like huskies or don't like snowboards or don't like huskies on snowboards, it's not fun. And one big part of marketing is identifying a coherent population of people who all want the same thing, even though it may not be obvious yet, so that you can activate all of them with a campaign or with an asset that gets to all of them at the same time. I mean, this is even the ability to interpret what is fun or relevant or useful for a group of people. That is a gift that really good marketers have, which is a human gift. Like you can't ask an LLM that at the moment. What you can do is you can ask it to do a segmentation based on, for instance, if you have a hypothesis as a marketer that the way people use words to describe a problem is how you can identify a segment, that is something you can ask a language model to help you do, right? Because in the past, you might have to do very complicated field exercises in order to get that information out. Today, maybe if the corpus exists and the corpus is what the language model has been trained on, you can ask a language model, show me all the words associated with describing a particular product in this way. And you will have done the research in a way that is probably more cost effective, probably quicker. But ultimately, you, the human, are still the person that has decided that this is what is worth doing. And then the language model is giving you, is your tool in doing it.
Because we're running up close to the end of the episode, I wanted to ask about the uncertainty we're all currently in. So as we've kind of touched upon in the beginning, I'm more on the scared edge. Eric is more on the optimized, excited edge of it. Do you have any predictions, maybe, based on your experience with uncertain times, as to how this general sentiment towards AI application and marketing could evolve?
I always say that prediction is, I usually don't predict because things never work out like that. I think I will say some things about what seems to work best. What things seem to work in times that are highly uncertain. So maybe before I say that, I'll say something very quick. There is a difference between what we think of as risky and what we think of as uncertain, right? Like we often use the two words more or less interchangeably, but a risky situation is one in which you know all the actions you can take, all the possible outcomes that could result, and you know the probabilities of any given outcome given any action. I think that's almost universally not the case for us now. Like we're actually facing true uncertainty where we may not know all the actions that we can take. You know, we may not know all the outcomes that are possible, and we certainly don't know all the causal connections, the probabilities between given actions and given outcomes. So in this kind of situation, the first thing that seems to work better is people and teams and organizations that are clear about facing a situation. So I now call them situations of not knowing. And there's a reason for that. If the person or the team or the organization is clearly identifying that they're not in a risky scenario, they tend to act in different ways, right? So if you're in a risky scenario, what you do is you risk manage and you try and mitigate against expected outcomes so that you do things like buy insurance against expected outcomes that are bad. If a team or a person or an organization is facing a situation that they recognize as being not risk, but also filled with not knowing of some sort, they tend to behave differently in several different ways that are useful for them. They tend not to take very big bets. They tend to experiment in small ways, right? Because you don't take a big bet because you don't know what to bet big on. You think there may be lots of small actions you can take, and you want to figure out what those small actions will do. So you take lots of small actions that are very different from each other, and you learn a lot along the way. So in a sense, experimentation on lots of small things is something that especially teams and organizations and people facing non-risk not knowing, they do, and that helps them figure out what to keep on doing. Another thing that seems to work for these kinds of organizations is that they hire people who are able to change. They are more comfortable with being in a situation where they don't know what to do. And it turns out these people are actually quite rare, right? Most people are trained to be good at doing a particular thing. They become comfortable doing that particular thing. And when you take away the certainty of this is what you have to do, this is your success metric, most people are not very good at it. The people who are good at it are very valuable because they can change what they do, they can adapt. They're a little bit like a Swiss Army knife rather than a knife. And teams and organizations that specifically look out for these kinds of people, they also tend to be more successful. Now, looking out for these kinds of people who can change what they do as the needs change, that's actually what negotiated joining and open-ended roles do, like to go back to what we started this whole conversation with. And that's why I said maybe it would make more sense to talk about it at the end, because if an organization is facing a situation where they don't know what is going to happen next, but you're not in a risky scenario, really the best resource that you have is having an organization that is full of people that can figure things out along the way and change, right? And the way to do that is to hire in a way that I think of as being fundamentally different from conventional hiring. And the way I've given it a name, just for convenience, it's about continually changing roles that you negotiate with the organization and with your other coworkers, because the needs that you are trying to fulfill with the work that you do are also changing over time. And, you know, to come back to what's happening now in the world of marketing and more generally in the world of work, if you see that there's a tool that's taking away a lot of the work that people in this industry traditionally do, like a lot of the work of asset management in marketing is frankly something which I think a machine can do better. But what this means is all the people who spend a lot of their time managing assets, they need to figure out what it is that they can do better than the machine so that they continue to add value. And in fact, they can increase the value that the person plus machine combination can bring to the organization or to the industry, right? And in fact, we've talked about a lot of that today. If asset management is just about creating 45 colorway variants of an image of a shoe or a shirt, a machine can do that better. Now, what the asset management team needs to do is they need to figure out what are the color variations that you want this set of assets to have. They need to figure out questions like, what are the hypotheses we want to test with the campaigns that we're building with these assets? These are things that right now you cannot ask the machine to do it for you. You can ask the machine to help you do them. I mean, you can ask it, for instance, I want to run 10 different campaigns. Give me 10 audience segmentations based on the following criteria. This is something that the machine can probably do better than a human in the sense that it can do it more quickly, but the human still needs to ask it the question so that the machine can do it.
Totally. I feel it like, now it's more about like experiencing a certain challenge and then coming with different ways to even like, explore it and test it and just figure out, how to deal with it. So definitely, as you said about this negotiated joining, like you certainly search for people with autonomy and actually, people who are able to figure things out. And actually, even now with the number of like tools that we could test, this is extraordinary, huge number. So actually we need to be able to choose like the kind of like, let's say top 5 or top 3 or like top 2, and then just like, run with it for a short period of time, learn, share, like spread the outcomes, and then like, go from there and then explore further. So definitely I feel what you just said.
Yeah. Just one thing to say, by the way. I don't think it's just about finding people who are able to adapt. That's incredibly important as well. But even the way you hire people also needs to change, right? Like inside the company, if you think about the traditional way you hire people, you write a job description, you go out and you look for people who match the job description, and then you try and hire people who are the best match. You use interviews and like aptitude tests and things like that to do it. I think what I'm proposing is something fundamentally different. It requires changing the way you think of what it means to join a company. It means saying part of your role is not yet set in stone. You figure it out along the way and you show us what benefit that brings to us as a company. And that's the negotiated part of it. It starts with the assumption that your role is not fixed. And what that means is it forces both the team or the organization that is hiring and the person that is joining to rethink what it means to work, right? Like it means always having a little bit of not knowing about what it is that you're doing so that you're always figuring it out. It's like this very dynamic sense in which there is no stability, but that lack of stability causes things to happen that are good for the organization and the person involved.
Sure. And I guess that it also means that it's very important to understand what we do and why we do it, and then how it just we'll figure it out. But I think that it helps. I mean, especially in times of uncertainty, if you at least know why you do certain things, that helps a lot.
For sure. And the only people so far who can say why, like doing this is good, doing that is bad, doing this is better than doing that, are humans, because answering the why question is always a meaning-making exercise, right? It isn't a statistical exercise. It can be that you say, if 51% of people want to do this, then I will also think it's good. But even when you say something like that, that's still a meaning-making exercise that is on top of a statistical exercise that you have chosen, because you've decided that is the way you will decide whether or not something is good.
Operation Automation is backed up by GetResponse, the marketing automation platform that's been on the market for over 20 years. Subscribe for more juicy insights. And remember, automate, don't complicate.